Thank you very much, and I was going to say I'm happy to talk. I'm not happy to talk at all, but I feel it's very important to talk and share some of my experiences, my observations in Gaza, and looking around, seeing these signs, "Stop Starving Gaza." And I'm going to talk predominantly about the forced man-made starvation, the malnutrition, the famine which is killing thousands of people in Gaza. And I'm going to talk also about the appallingly named Gazan Humanitarian Foundation, which has been responsible for killing many hundreds of young boys, many of whom I've operated on over the last month. So I came out of Gaza last week, having spent 4 weeks working at Nasser Hospital. It was my third trip out there since October the 7th, 2023. And as with previous trips, I thought I'd be ready for what I was going to see. I know Gaza well, I've been there many times, I speak to people most days out there, so I thought I'd be ready. But as always, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw out there, the appalling war crimes I witnessed with my own eyes, the genocide that's being carried out, the ethnic cleansing that's been carried out in front of our eyes, and with the complicity of our government. Let me tell you about Zainab. Zainab was a 7-month-old baby who I met on the paediatric ward about 4 weeks ago. She looked like a newborn baby, and she was starving, and she was dying of malnutrition. And they couldn't find any formula feed to feed her. At one point they were giving her 10% dextrose, which effectively is sugar water, and she was losing weight. One of the reasons, or the reason why there was no formula feed to give her, was because the Israelis have prevented any food, any medical aid, any nutritional supplements getting into Gaza for several months. What's even worse is that many doctors I know have brought in formula feed into Gaza because they knew of the shortage. And they all described to me, some American doctors I was working with, they all described to me how their luggage was searched at the border, and every single carton, every single bottle of formula feed was taken out of their luggage and taken away by the Israelis. Nothing else taken, very specifically the formula feed being taken away by the Israeli border guards. Zainab died 10 days ago. She died of forced man-made starvation caused by the Israelis preventing food getting in there. Let me tell you about Habiba. Habiba was an 11-year-old girl who was a victim of a serious, terrible explosive injury from a bomb which landed on the tent she was living in Al-Mawasi. She had terrible chest injuries, and the shrapnel destroyed her lower esophagus in her chest. I spent the whole of one night operating on her 3 weeks ago, reconstructing her esophagus, putting a feeding tube into her intestine because I knew she wouldn't be able to eat or drink for weeks. We couldn't find anywhere the right feed to feed her. When we eventually did get some, she'd been starved for so long that her guts, her intestines couldn't tolerate the feed, and so we had to feed her intravenously. But there was no intravenous feed at all in Gaza, so we couldn't feed this poor girl. Despite that, she seemed to be improving when I left, and when I said goodbye to her and her father. And 4 days ago, I got a very distressing phone call from my colleagues there to say that she had died. Another example of a beautiful little girl dying as a direct result of the Israelis preventing feed, preventing nutrition getting in there. Until several months ago, there were 400 food distribution sites in Gaza, run very well by UNRWA and other agencies. As you will know, they've been banned from distributing any food in Gaza, and the Americans and the Israelis came up with this idea that the appallingly named Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would distribute food from 4 distribution sites. Well, let me tell you about the patients I operated on who'd gone to the distribution sites to get food. They've been called death traps, these food distribution sites. They create riots, they create chaos, and then the young teenage boys are shot by Israeli soldiers and by quadcopters. Now, I know this because I operated on many of them. I spoke to the victims, I spoke to their families, and indeed I spoke to Gazan healthcare workers who had actually been to those food sites. They'd gone, sometimes between operations, to get food for their starving families, and they witnessed these shootings. And these boys would be brought into hospital, sometimes 11, 12, 13 years of age, shot. One of them died on the operating table. We couldn't save his life, a 12-year-old boy, because he had such bad damage from the bullets. And what was even worse was not only were they being shot, but we noticed a very striking pattern of clusters of different body parts shot on different days of the week. So one day they would all come in shot in the head. The next day they'd all come in shot in the neck. The next day would be the abdomen. The day after that it would be the chest, the legs, the arms. One day, 3 weeks ago tomorrow, it was a Saturday night, 4 young teenage boys, 13, 14, came in, all of whom had been shot in the testicles. Just the testicles. This was target practice. This clustering of injuries was not coincidental. It was target practice, as if they were playing a game. Let's shoot the testicles today. Let's shoot the head tomorrow. Many children killed. The worst day when I was there were 50 children brought in, teenagers, all killed. 13 needing life-saving surgery in one night. This is a genocide. These are multiple war crimes, and our government, despite the rhetoric, despite the strong words they come out with, our government has sat back and allowed this to happen and have not taken any concrete actions at all to stop this genocide, these war crimes. When I left Gaza the other day, you have a very complex set of emotions when leaving this place. There's undoubted relief and joy that you're going to get home and see your family again. There's immense sadness and tears because you're leaving your friends, some of whom you've known for many years. You're leaving your friends who can't get out. You're leaving your patients who you know may not survive. And indeed your friends may be dead next time you go there. You feel guilt as well because you can go and they can't get out. You start planning your return as soon as possible. But you feel anger, intense anger at how the world has allowed this to happen, about how our politicians have allowed this to happen. And anger is the predominant emotion that I feel now, thinking about those poor people, those beautiful people in Gaza, who are being systematically killed, ethnically cleansed, and kicked out of Gaza. Thank you very much for listening.